timely webinar, Obtaining and Maintaining Employment in the Era of COVID-19. As law firms furlough employees, reduce salaries, and offers, we wanted to bring you experts from the front lines, experts who can share their views and their expertise on maneuvering the job and career opportunities market in this very unprecedented time. I also want to thank our co-sponsors of this webinar, the NBA Young Lawyers Division, Nick Austin Chair, the NBA Law Students Division, Kevin Jones Chair, and GWAC Bar Association, Miriam Hatcher, President. I want to just quickly introduce our very esteemed panel, and then I'll turn it over to them to do a deeper dive into their experience and their view from the front line. First, we have Robin Legrand, who's a legal recruiter and the Division Vice President with Act One Legal Staffing on the West Coast. Robin has a very distinguished career in legal staffing and focuses her experience and talents on taking attorneys where the market is going, not where it's been. Next is Tara Gray, who's an attorney and a recruiter with Randstad Professionals, which is located here in Washington, D.C. Tara works for the #1 staffing company in the world and handles temporary and permanent legal placement. Tara has a distinguished career, including working with the Washington Redskins and Denver Nuggets. Next, we have Lesley Henry. Lesley is an executive staff member with Axiom Law, an alternative to traditional law firms. Lesley is part of the leadership team. Axiom is an alternative to the traditional law firms, and they recruit attorneys for long-term legal assignments. They are the leaders in on-demand lawyers. Next, we have Deborah Owens. Deborah is an executive career coach at Corporate Alley Cat. Deborah has over 20 years experience with Fortune 100 businesses. Deborah's mission is to ensure that every person of color is fully supported and equipped for both the opportunities and challenges in the corporate area. And for our students and law student division, we have Fatema Keenan. Fatema is a senior career counselor working with students at George Washington University Law School. Fatema is actually one of my colleagues at GW Law School, and so I want to give a shout out to her. Fatema will give advice and counseling to our law students that are graduating, first and second law students. And lastly, and finally, we have our moderator, who is Krystal Studavent Ramsey, who is also an attorney and also with Axiom Law. With that, I will ask each of you to take a deeper dive into sharing with our participants your experience and a bit about what brings you here and your view from the front line. Starting with Robin Legrand.
First and foremost, I would like to say thank you so very much. I feel very honored and privileged to be here today. I've been in legal staffing now for probably 23 plus years. I have never ever seen a market quite the way in which it is today. I think I've run the gamut of from the recession through 9/11, and this market in particular is by far probably the most challenging market that I've seen to date. And so to be here to really be able to speak to fellow colleagues who are also experiencing the same thing that I'm experiencing, again, it's just a privilege to be here to guide those people of color and of women and just of professionals through this very precedent, uncharted time. We are definitely all seeing it on the front line. It was challenging before COVID-19 and it's even more so now. So again, it's just an honor and a privilege to be here.
Tara Gray.
All right, yes, as Valencia said, thank you once again for introducing me. My name is Tara Gray. I'm here in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area as far as location for all of those that are within the National Bar Association. I am with Randstad. Valencia mentioned that we're the #1 staffing company, but I think some may differ on that. We're actually the largest staffing company in the world. Monster, we have some others. We're based in the Netherlands. And we have a corporate headquarters in the US in Atlanta. I've been in recruiting for over 12 years now. I didn't realize it was that long. And I came into recruiting at the time of the recession, where lawyers and the legal community was the most affected in all of the downturns, as far as during that time period of '08. And just to go through this time period where individuals have to adjust, and there are so many uncertainties from the law firm standpoint to the corporate counsel to even recruiting. We have to do our jobs a little bit differently now, as far as communicating with our clients, with our candidates, and with one another. This is my second career. So I started my career more in the financial services area, dealing with compliance, Sarbanes-Oxley. So I was actually there in New York during 9/11. So I didn't even consider being a recruiter at that time. So I was working with the general counsel, working with other folks like the CEO, CFOs. So I understand both the corporate side, the law firm side, and I'm a graduate of Howard Law School. So any of those HU Bison out there, love it. HU. Yes, indeed. And that's about it. I'm glad to be here. It's an honor and a privilege once again, and hope we can shine some light on how you should proceed in this environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Lesley Henry.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here this evening. I'm based in Chicago, and as Valencia said, I lead our talent and recruitment efforts at Axiom Legal Services, where Krystal works too. So this is an extra special honor to be up with the moderator here. I'm a lawyer by profession, like many of us on the panel. So practiced for several years in big law in Toronto, which is where I'm from originally, but made the move about 10 years ago into the PD world. So I straddle both the recruiting and the professional development and coaching. So sort of, I consider that the push and pull of talent. So recruiting and bringing in great people. And then what do we do to keep people feeling great, especially at times like this where we're seeing market volatility and a lot of changes in the industry. So I think these topics that we're gonna dive into today are so pertinent and important and so timely that I'm just thrilled to be part of this discussion with these esteemed panelists. So thanks so much for having me.
Fantastic. Deborah Owens.
Hello, everybody. My name is Deborah Owens, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Corporate Alley Cat. I started the corporation with a singular mission, and that was to help professionals of color, primarily Black professionals, navigate the corporate arena. After 20 plus years with Fortune 100 companies, I was tired of seeing people get their careers derailed for silly things and not understanding how the environment works. Well, I know a lot of times we focus on the front end, which is getting a job, and then on the back end when it's not working. There's a lot of space in between, and that's where we focus on. How do you navigate? How do you have, we help people to have more than the technical skills. We talk about the relational skills. We talk about the influence skills. And that's one of the things that I found after working with thousands of professionals of color is that the navigation part often trips us up, not understanding the environment, not understanding how things get done in the organization, and more importantly, not having strategic relationships in place, which is so critical right now when there's a downturn. Do people know you, and do they know the value that you bring? So I'm excited to join this panel this evening.
Thank you. Fatema Keenan.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and I want to thank the Bar Association. And I'm excited to be on this panel, this distinguished panel, to talk about COVID and the issues they present for lawyers and law students in particular. What Valencia did mention is that she's a colleague at GW. What she didn't mention is that she's a very distinguished adjunct faculty here, and we value her. So thank you for that introduction, but also kudos to you in what you do. In terms of my quick background is for about 10 years, I was an education advocate for children in foster care in DC. And then I switched gears to working as a disability complaint specialist at the Pentagon, and then worked in DC Superior Court. So I understand what it's like to switch gears between the legal world. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that and how you do that. But also in terms of during a time of COVID, some of the skills that law firms in particular are looking for. Being at the Career Center, one advantage we have is that we are in constant communication with law firms, nonprofit organizations, government agencies, as to what they're looking for. So I'm excited to be on this panel and talk about these issues with the other panelists. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Fatema, and our moderator, Krystal Studavent Ramsey.
So last but not least, I am Krystal Studavent Ramsey, and it is a pleasure to be with the MBA Women Lawyers Division yet again. It's always a pleasure to speak for this group because we always have a great time and always have timely discussions. So thank you for that, Valencia. My background is as a corporate attorney. So I started my career as a corporate attorney, did that for about 6 years. And similar to most of the panelists, I ended up pivoting into business development. And I've been in business development for the last 7 years in the legal space, where my role is client facing. I'm mostly consulting GCs, associate GCs, managing partners, and talking to them about Axiom's business model and how we can be a resource for them. So that's currently what I'm doing now.
Thank you. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator and we will begin.
Perfect. Well, again, I want to start by thanking you, Valencia, for this timely discussion. It's right on time. And like I said, we always have a good time with this group. We're always able to let our hair down and walk away with a bunch of juicy nuggets that we can put in our toolbox to help us be better and to help us be successful. So thank you to you. Thank you to Madam President Robinson, to the Women Lawyers Division, and also just to the wider National Bar Association for this programming. Before we dive into the questioning, I have to acknowledge the fact that 2020 has been a whirlwind year. I think we can all attest to this being a whirlwind year. I know I started the top of the year, ended up, the company I was working for, Bliss Lawyers, was acquired by Axiom, and now here I am working alongside Lesley at Axiom. Ended up marrying the love of my life and having my fairy tale wedding in front of 400 plus guests. Ended up being able to do the first leg of my honeymoon in Ixtapa, Mexico. And as soon as I touched back down in Houston, Texas, which is where I'm at, they let me know you're gonna have to go home immediately. And there is now a shelter-in-place mandate. So shortly after that, my stepkids coming to stay with me and all of us here under one roof together. And so all of that exacerbated by this major pandemic and COVID, mass layoffs, the furloughs, the cutting of costs all around me, dealing with clients with those issues, and then also the unfortunate killings of George Floyd, and then also Breonna Taylor, and then also most recently Rayshard Brooks. So with all of that going on, and then you add the other layer of the fact that there's a cartoon that just came out on LinkedIn where they were showing this Black woman sitting in front of a panel of white men, and the white men are asking her, what is it that you can bring to the table? And that cartoon basically symbolizes the other layer that we're dealing with, which is what we've been dealing with, which is the fact that we're still the most underrepresented group, Black women that is, the most underrepresented group in the corporate pipeline. And so with all of that, in addition to us taking care of our families and our spouses and our kids and hosting Zoom parties and having all of these things going on, the question becomes, how do we maintain our sanity amid this pandemic, but also how do we thrive? So with this dynamic panel of women, we're gonna be able to cover some of those things today. And so I'm looking forward to that conversation. But before we start, I wanna break the ice. I want us all to just stretch it out a little bit, stretch it out, relax, stretch it out, get your beverage of choice. If you don't have it already, silence your phone if you can. Get your notepad because you don't wanna miss anything that these women are gonna share this evening, and get ready. And if you can, if you have kids, send them out so that you're able to just be immersed in this experience. And so I'm gonna ask everybody who's on, if you could, we have a Q&A box. Let us know where you're from. Let us know who you are. Let us know what you do for a living, because I like to know who I'm talking to so we can engage as a community. So drop that information in the Q&A box. And then also throughout the program, if you have any questions for these lovely ladies, be sure to drop that in the Q&A box, and I'm gonna try to get to as many as I can. So without further ado, I don't wanna hold up this conversation. So I talked at a high level you know, what's going on in the market. But these women are on the front lines every day on the employment scene, so they know exactly what's going on. So I want to start with Robin. Robin, how has the pandemic shifted the way that employers conduct searches?
Well, you know, when I rolled myself out, forgive me for that. I'm actually here in the West Coast. I'm in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And I did not mention that, so forgive me for that. But I'm here in Los Angeles, and I'm finding the market was just beginning to turn before COVID here on the West Coast, wherein opportunities were opening, firms were more amenable and more open to new talent. When COVID hit, everything paused. I myself had several deals that were in the makings, and when COVID hit, those deals were snatched off the table. And so I'm finding more so now that firms in particular, the trigger is much slower for them to pull. The interview process is by far more stringent. It is without question an employer's market. Prior to COVID, I would say on an average for myself, let's say if I made a posting, I would roughly screen 100 candidates per one opportunity. And now employers are finding, with furloughs, with layoffs, probably 5 times that number on the West Coast. And so it is definitely by far more challenging. I probably spend 50% of my day counseling candidates who are in a state of panic because employers are very, very slow to pull the trigger. And more importantly, they seem to be more reluctant to onboard people because people are still working remotely. So particularly, I would say for attorneys in particular, they seem to be less amenable of onboarding remotely. And so the process is really, really slow, and it's definitely dragging.
And I can attest to that on the client side as well. There's been, you know, projects that have been delayed and hiring freezes, so I'm seeing that as well. Lesley, same question to you. What are you seeing?
Yeah, just to add on to what Robin's saying, that same sentiment around sort of the onboarding and the more you can, the more either the organization sort of supporting the individual or the individual him or herself that can kind of lean in on the technology piece. So being able to leverage skills with anything in the onboarding phase, anything with the interview, just being really comfortable with technology has really helped in a time where we're sort of facing a new reality around how we interview, how we search, how we onboard. Companies are looking for the people that they hire and the organizations with whom they partner to hire to have that sort of comfort level and that skill to make that bridge from an on-site presence to a pretty seamless remote presence. So I'm seeing a preference for sort of that virtual, we're interviewing more remotely, we're interviewing virtually. I know we'll get to that later, and I see some people nodding. So I think there's a lot of feedback and ideas we can share there for how to set candidates up for success. But from a search perspective, that's a trend we're seeing for sure. And I think to an extent, we're seeing clients where we, you know, to Robin's point, there's definitely kind of a shift in demand for sure with a more supply than demand right now. But I will say that when there are hires being made, skills like commerciality, partnership, advisory, some of those more, those softer skills, this is anecdotal feedback, but I think they're playing in a lot right now. You know, the technical acumen's a baseline, but then being able to consult through a really tumultuous period is a really significant skill right now. And I would say we're going to see that more as companies are performing their searches as skills they're looking for.
Okay. Good advice. And Tara, are you seeing the same thing on your end?
You know what? I'll just add, because you have two comments that have pretty much been what I'm experiencing as well. The biggest piece would be the slowdown. One of my friends, she actually calls this COVID-19 the great pause. So I'm borrowing that from her, because there was a pause after everyone shifted from their in-person locations to remote locations. Do we have the capability? We have some sole practitioners that don't have the bandwidth to have WebEx meetings and Zoom meetings and even give their candidates laptops if they need them. So I've seen that to be the biggest pause. And then I'll give you an example of a hiring experience. My first hire that I've had where the individual was hired, onboarded, and has never met in person their supervisor, their team. They've met them just like this in a Zoom situation. They said she was great. You know, I presented her prior to COVID, but she just missed that timing to go into the office. She received her offer electronically as normal, accepted her offer. They did the onboarding through electronic means. She received a computer in the mail to her home, received a cell phone to her home, and now she is working for a new company, has given her resignation to her old firm. They were sad, but no lunches. That's the reality. And now she says, yes, I started on Monday. But she's never met any of those folks. It's like me joining your company and this is how I've met you. So that it would be an example of how it's changed right now. So I can add to that question.
And I'm hearing a lot of that, even some friends of mine that have never ever met their team before, and you know, and probably won't meet their team for some months now. And then, you know, interview styles, you know, also changing. I read an article about a GC who was onboarded. And the team met him in the parking lot at an airport, and they were, you know, doing the interview across the parking lot. So definitely interview styles seem to be changing too. And in that regard, you know, what are tips that y'all can share to having a successful interview during this time? Because I think that's so crucial. So I'm gonna ask that question and start with Robin.
I think the first thing is to recognize that you still have to make a first impression. And I'm amazed sometimes, you know, we're very much in our comfort zone now because we are remote and we are at home, but we forget sometimes that we are still in fact interviewing. And so it's important to have your background clean, to have your presence as you would if you were standing physically in front of an employer. I think that this part is critical. We've become pretty lax right now towards working at home. I myself, I'm guilty. When I get up, today was the first time I put on a suit in 3 months.
Well, you look great.
Yeah, thank you. And so, but I myself, I've become very relaxed in working at home. So I'm sitting in my home office and I'm sitting, you know, I can grab my cup of coffee. I'm in my t-shirt, I'm in my jeans, I'm at home. But when you're interviewing, of course, you should still, you know, you should still wear a suit and you should present yourself the same way in which you would if you were sitting across from a true decision maker. I think also many people, phone interviews are difficult at most. It's hard to keep momentum up because you can't read that other person's face to know if they've checked out, if they've checked in. So momentum is very, very challenging and difficult. Some people just are not very good at phone interviews. Some people maybe feel somewhat stressed even conducting a Zoom interview. So I think it's just important to recognize you're still holding a conversation with a human being. It's just technology and current circumstances are taking us into a completely different direction. But nevertheless, you're still going to make a first impression because you are in an interview phase.
Definitely. And I think people were actually struggling with the technology pre-COVID. So, Fatema, I'm interested to hear from you.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. To echo what was said, one thing you want to make sure is look at the background, not just the background behind you in terms of anything distracting, because when you're interviewing, the focus should be on you, not necessarily what's behind you, but also think about what's in front of you. So even though the interviewer may not see what's in front of you, if you've got things that are distracting to you that are in front of you, your eye contact is not going to be the same because you're going to be looking at all the other things that are around you and behind you. So you want to make sure that your background is clear, but also what you're facing is clear so you won't be distracted. Also, cell phones. A lot of people forget to turn off their phones. That is something that remind yourself, something to do, especially when we're working from homes. We tend to have our phones constantly on, so make sure your ringer is off. The lighting is important. Make sure that the person can visibly see you if you're on video. and this is important for phone and for video interviews, and I'm seeing obviously more of that through COVID, but you want to make sure that you know what your sound modulation is and how you navigate that. A lot of times when you get excited, your pitch tends to be higher. And so try to maintain not only eye contact in terms of looking at the camera, but also maintain a constant level of volume in terms of your sound and your audio, especially if you're on the phone, because they can't see you. They can't really assess what you're saying. So those are the logistics in terms of the interviewing that I would say keep in mind, and try to keep your answers brief, because they've usually got a certain amount of time to get particular answers, and the focus should be on you and your interpersonal skills. As lawyers, we tend to focus on legal research and writing skills. That comes across on resume and a writing sample and a cover letter. The interview, whether it's phone or whether it's on video, it's your chance to show your interpersonal skills, which in light of COVID is becoming increasingly a skill that employers are looking for.
Definitely. Tara, are you seeing the same thing, or do you have the similar advice?
Yes, same advice. Actually, pre-COVID, the exception would be a phone interview or a video chat or interview or meeting. And that's probably the recruiter's least favorite way to present their candidate initially, is through a phone. But I'll just give one more pointer, because all of these were great already prior to myself. I used to have this little mirror that I have if I don't have a mirror in front of me when I'm doing my phone interview. I'm a pacer. When I walk when I talk. So I'd like to stand up when I'm on the phone interview. But you don't want to have distractions where you're moving too much either. But that's if you know your content as well. You want to have your resume in front of you. I've seen people, they're on a phone screen and they don't have their resume in front of them. That's the biggest time you can lay out all of your information in front of you and they will never know. And then so with the mirror part, back to the mirror, look at yourself when you're interviewing on the phone. See if you're smiling at times, because they can't see your smile. They can't see when you're shaking your head. They don't know the natural transition. And then just like Fatema said, make it short or brief, and a way to transition through that process to say, have I answered your question adequately? And then they can say, oh, yes, you have, let's move on, or no, you can continue. So that's your way of, if their head is nodding and they're looking to the next question, you would normally feel that. But because you can't feel it, you need to sometimes put out some verbal cues so you can kind of transition through your phone screen. I'll just give that pointer for the phone screen part. Everything else with Zoom and video conferencing was great. Great advice.
And that's all great advice, especially for even someone like me who's an extrovert. And it's hard sometimes for me to pick up on these digital cues. I'm like, I need to be in person. But so that's great advice. Lesley, you have any other tips to close this out?
For sure. And I'll try not to overlap what other people have said. There's two things that have resonated with me. One, Robin was talking about dressing the part and coming professional and coming ready for your interview as if it's an on-site interview. And I completely agree with that. And I think the more you can do to sort of mitigate the stress of an interview, the better. If you're unsure how to dress, I think it's totally appropriate to ask the recruiter. I've noticed, someone I work with mentioned this to me, and I think it's a great tip. I've noticed maybe the culture at the client, this company is pretty relaxed. How do you suggest what would be an appropriate dress code for our chat next week? It's on Zoom, I want to, match it. Ask those questions, take away any of the ambiguity, take away any of the angst during an uncertain time, so you don't even have any worries in your mind and you're ready kind of to hit the ground. And similarly, having kind of, we were prepping for today's webinar, and I said, if my internet goes down, should I dial in on the phone? Have those sort of, and that was my way of saying, I'm a little nervous. What can I do so that if something goes awry, I feel like I have some control? It shows the recruiter you can think on your feet and pivot quickly, but also it helps just take away the angst of an somewhat uncomfortable situation. So do what you can to answer those questions ahead of time. How many people am I going to be speaking with? Will they be dialing in for me, or should I go into different links? What should I, what dress code's more of an on-site question, but I think it works for Zoom as well. And then, if we get disconnected, is there a number I should call you at? If my Wi-Fi is a bit off, what should I do? Just things to sort of take away the edge and the newness of this time that we're navigating. I think just sets a candidate for a more comfortable interaction, which then makes an interview feel all that much more natural and sets the candidate up for, I think, a little more success. So those would be tips I would give to people as they're coming through the process.
Love that. And so now I'm interested to know, in all of your everyday practices, what industries, from a trend perspective, what industries and practices are hiring right now? With so many layoffs, with so many furloughs, which ones are still seeing a demand and still need talent? So I'm going to start with you, Tara.
Oh, okay. I had to unmute. Technical.
No problem.
In this DC, Maryland, Virginia area, you'll know, because we're here with the government, we still have the influx of, or the demand for the government contracts associates and partners. And then that has an overarching, that's the parent, so to speak. And then you have the FCA, False Claims Act, antitrust attorneys, all that attached to the government here in this region. But then you also have now the increase in the corporate attorneys, the employment litigators, because we have a number of cases and issues behind employment and people being terminated during this time or furloughed, and they're not necessarily happy with the way it happened. As we've heard some of the horror stories and great stories of transitioning through this COVID-19, where those candidates or those particular attorneys were actually released and didn't know that it was coming. And some of them were actually partners and didn't know. So, there's a big demand in all of those areas, especially with some of on the corporate side. You may have some of the IT software companies, because there's just a boom right now. If you didn't have stock in Zoom, you may have stock in Zoom right now. But because there's such an influx of, now we need this tool in order to do our day-to-day jobs. Not everyone has the WebEx access, like I mentioned before. So those areas are trending right now. If we had to say if there's something that's trending and an increase, but it varies based on the geographic location, and we work all over the world, of course. But right now in this particular area, I'll leave it to that, and then others can kind of comment on their regions.
Thank you for that. And yes, my husband has already invested in his stock for Zoom. So you are correct. Robin, I'll turn to you. What are you seeing right now?
I think on the West Coast, I'm finding each and every day I'm writing more job orders, in particular for plaintiff side labor and employment, plaintiff side personal injury, workers' compensation, labor employment actually on both sides, both plaintiff and defense, but more particularly for plaintiff side. And I think as we continue on in the economic downturn, I think we're going to see more of an uptick for need of bankruptcy attorneys, real estate attorneys. I'm not seeing on the West Coast as much of a need. In fact, in the last 90 days, I've not written a job order for corporate attorney. Yet pre-COVID, corporate attorneys were in hot demand. So I think as I kind of look at the market trend where we are, everything seems to be very, very much tailored toward the plaintiff side of law. And I think, again, as we continue to move forward, we'll see probably more things in healthcare litigation. I think litigation here on the West Coast in particular is definitely going to be the driver. And I anticipate there's going to be a lot of lawsuits here in Los Angeles. And I think what I'm trying to strive for with my clients is that time is now to actually obtain talent that probably they would not have seen otherwise had it not been for COVID. So those are the markets that are pretty much trending here.
Lesley, are you seeing the same?
Yeah, the bankruptcy, restructuring, insolvency, that world is, I think, on its way up for sure. Demand there is going to pick up. We've for sure seen a pickup in labor and employment, both sides, but definitely seen that. Also, contracts. There's breach of contract. There's force majeure. There's a lot in the contract space, I think, right now, where we'll see sort of some consistency in demand. But other than what Robin and Tara said, those are sort of my three big pockets that we're seeing a lot of need for.
And Fatema, from where you sit, are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, I'm on the East Coast, and I'll make it real quick. The 5 areas that I think are trending, especially with COVID, are bankruptcy, which was mentioned, because and both on the people side and corporate side, there are a lot of businesses that are filing for bankruptcy, and a lot of people that are filing for bankruptcy. Second is real estate, again on the business side, but also on the personal side, where there are foreclosures and renters that don't have the ability to pay. So housing law, that sort of thing. The third area that I'm not sure was mentioned was data privacy. So anything that has to deal with data privacy or technological issues, we've seen an increase in that. The fourth area, which was mentioned, was employer labor type of litigation. And the last is healthcare law. And I think that was trending before COVID, but even more so now, because a lot of hospitals are losing money. They're experiencing more needs for lawyers. So those are the 5 practice areas that I think are trending due to COVID.
I'm writing notes too. Thank you. Well, with all, I mean, and so now that folks understand, you know, they now know the industries and practices that are in demand. Now it's like, how do you position yourself, you know, during this time, you know, because although there are some industries, some practices, as you all spoke about, that are hiring, then there are others that are not. So, and then you also talked about that there's a lot more supply right now than demand. So the question becomes, how do you position yourself right now? I know even my stepdaughter is asking that question. How can I find opportunities? And we also have a question that I think ties in nicely in the Q&A. And someone is saying, look, I'm trying to re-enter into the practice of law, and how can I do that at this time? You know, so you have that going on. You have law students, you know, who are looking, you know, with the summer internship programs being done away with at certain firms. So a number of people trying to figure out how to position themselves. So the question is, what are ways for attorneys right now to invest in and position themselves to maximize their career and professional growth during the pandemic? And I'm going to start with you, Robin.
Sure. I think first and foremost is flexibility. Candidates right now, you need to be flexible in terms of entering perhaps into a new practice arena, as we mentioned, striking where it's hot. If you're a defense side labor and employment attorney, many firms are amenable to looking at you on the plaintiff side. I think candidates are going to have to be more flexible now in terms of compensation. Many firms now, because they know that they are the driver, they pretty much are really scaling back on salaries. So I think flexibility is also going to be critical here in terms of that. I think it is a prime opportunity right now for sole practitioners, which is really an area of specialization for myself. Right now, with so many firms imploding and really struggling to hold on to their own client bases, now it's probably a phenomenal opportunity for sole practitioners to start entering into that space wherein they can also, you know, seek assistance for pre-existing clients or existing clients. I speak to many sole practitioners like, what should I do? I said, believe it or not, the time right now for you is hot. So I think as we continue to move forward, I think people also need to also be cognizant of this furlough and layoff and know that this is a very temporary space as well. And if unfortunately you've fallen victim to either, you still must remain extremely aggressive in your search and not allow that time to lapse on your resume. So although you may have been furloughed, you may have been, you may have been laid off, the time is now, that time of essence is now to really engage your search. And this is what I've been educating people on pretty much every single day. It's just keeping that momentum up, staying out there, leveraging relationships, letting it be known if you've been laid off, if you're unemployed, if you see, and more importantly, if you see the writing on the wall and you see that it's coming, don't wait for the ball to drop. Start immediately seeking new opportunities. And again, leveraging relationships.
Love that advice. And I have to do a shameless plug now. You mentioned the word flexibility is key. And at Axiom, we love flexibility. So I want to turn to Lesley now for her to share some ways that she's seen that, for attorneys to invest in themselves.
Yeah, I love that, Krystal. I do think to Robin's point on the flexibility, being really open to paths and opportunities that you maybe wouldn't have originally thought you'd take. Thinking about skills you have that are transferable, going into an interview and being able to showcase those will set you up for great success. I have two things that sort of really resonated with me, and that was on like the relationships. And then I'll add to like a networking concept here. And I think I'm also, I do a lot on the lawyer retention side of things. So this is, I think, a great skill as you think about where you currently are in your career and how to advance while working remotely and arguably feeling a bit disconnected from some of your colleagues. So still spending that time and being mindful of investing in those relationships with your colleagues. You don't have water cooler talk. You don't have stopping in the kitchen to chit chat and find them, talk to your, someone you're meeting about a potential opportunity or a file you can join on or a new case. You really have to seek those opportunities out now and actually be a bit more purposeful in those conversations. So maybe saying to someone, hey, I'd love to engage in a mentorship conversation. I'd love to schedule one-on-ones just to like hear how you're doing. Maybe just tack on 5 minutes to a meeting you're having with someone and small talk for a little bit. Don't forget about the value of investing in personal relationships while you're currently in a role. And then of course I'll pivot in a minute to talk about networking for new roles. But when you're thinking about, when I think about this, maximizing your career growth, there's so much that a mentor, a colleague, the advice someone gives you sort of off the side of their desk that's so valuable that we risk losing when we're just sending a document or redlining an agreement over email. So maybe saying, hey, can we talk about this agreement, or just building in that time to connect with people. We don't know how long we'll be working like this for. So investing in those relationships is really, really critical. And that's what I would say to people who are currently in seat and thinking about ways to progress during this unique time. For those that are looking for a job, it's a great time to network. There's no boundaries. You can reach out to anyone. Everyone's got time. So they're on LinkedIn, they're looking around, join networking groups, professional, personal, find some things you're interested in, listen to seminars, enhance your own knowledge, but also meet new people. And it's a really great time to just reconnect. People are craving that I mean, I've heard this in personal lives. Oh, my high school friends all get together now on Zoom, or my college friends are doing this. Like, people are craving that connection. So let's bring that to the professional forum and do the same thing. So reach out to people, comment on their post, maybe post something yourself, but thinking a little bit more about how to network. I think it's an easier time to do that. I really, really do, because there's no need to be on site. You can be doing it from your home. You can do it at any hour on your computer. There's sort of no boundaries there. So the theme I would say here is that relationships that Robin pointed out. I would really say it's a key time now when you're talking about entering into a chapter and then enhancing the opportunities within. Keep leveraging those relationships and take the time, be purposeful in investing in them.
Love that. And I now want to turn it to Tara. Tara, did you have anything to add?
Just briefly, I'll say you may use someone like Deborah Owens, who's on the phone or on a Zoom right now during this time, to have a career coaching session with someone to say, you know what, I have time to really think about where I want to go with my career and how can I do that in the professional development side. If you have some courses or those that you've thought about during the time where you didn't have the time, just the commute time that we're saving alone, I have like 2 hours of extra time during the day that I can use to learn a language or do something else that will allow me to enhance who I am right now, but then also think about where do I want to go after COVID? And like Lesley said, how long will we be in this type of dynamic, in this situation? So, benefit from your LinkedIn and continue to communicate. I echo all of their sentiments. And I think this is a great time for you to really enhance yourself right now at this time.
That question was such a great segue to lead into the next question. And of course, Deborah's going to be the first one that I address this question to, since you brought her up, Tara. And that is that, several of you have talked about investing in relationships and the importance of, being purposeful, Lesley, as you mentioned about, making connections. And Deborah, you talked earlier in the conversation about strategic relationships, and I know you're going to talk to us more about that. But what do you do when women are saying, listen, I don't feel comfortable reaching out right now with everything going on with COVID, people are social distancing. This is probably not the best time to do that. So, what is the best way to network right now and to create these connections that y'all are talking about, or maintain the current connections during this time?
So one of the things I wanted to say is that people were actually social distancing before COVID-19. People felt uncomfortable. So let's be clear about that. So I want us to remove those excuses, right? When you had people down the hall, you weren't meeting with them then. So it's not social distancing. The only thing that has changed is your geography. And I believe that it's easier than ever now to connect with people, right? COVID-19 is going on. How are you doing? How's your family? Black Lives Matter. What's going on there? Give you an example. I have a client and he is the managing director of a $1 billion business for North America. And I reached out to him, I just sent him an email and I said, time to talk. I said, hey, a lot has changed since we last spoke. I'd love to jump on a call and get your perspective and insights on this current climate. It can be as simple as that. I've sent that out to a number of people. People want to talk about these things, right? So don't be scared to reach out there. In terms of networking, I do virtual coffees. I even have a little thing on my calendar. Well, I'll send someone and say, hey, do you want to have a virtual coffee? I don't want people to forget about your environment, the people who are in your community right now that you're not connecting with. Oftentimes people say, oh, I don't have a network. I don't know that many people. Listen, you're in a sorority or fraternity. You went to Howard University Law School or some other school. You have a church. Most of these churches now have career ministries. So I always say to people, start with the people who are closest to you, who know you and would be comfortable advocating for you. You have to let people know that you need help. So I'll give you another idea. One of the things that my client did was, is everybody familiar with the Christmas card? You know, people who send out the Christmas card letter and here's what the kids are doing and all of that kind of stuff. Yep. So what my client did was she put together a letter and it was to give people an update on what's been going on. And she said, you know, brought them up to speed. And then she says, I am transitioning. Here's what I've done in the past. Here's what I'm looking to do. If you have any resources or connections, that would be great. The other thing in terms of your network, Krystal, and to the other panelists, I want to apologize in advance for my comment I'm about to make. Now, if I was in the audience right now and I'm looking at a job and I want to know what industries are hot, I want to know what skills are in demand, I've got 6 or 7 people right here who have the answers to that. So what I would do is I'd say, I'm going to go to Tara because she's a bison. I would say, hey, Tara, I saw you on this webinar. I thought the information you shared was great. I really struggle with X, Y, and Z, or what you said really resonated. I'd love to get your perspective on X, Y, and Z. This is my approach, and get some feedback. You can do that. And I also, this is my little secret, when you reach out to people, say something, let them know why you want to talk to them, and ask for the meeting. Ask for it. Most people say, nobody got back to me. And I had people pull up their LinkedIn messages. I said, well, let's look at the message. Well, you didn't ask them to get back to you. You didn't say you wanted to meet, right? So be specific. If it's urgent, then say, I'd love to meet with you this week or next week. Let people know. So that's the first thing I would do. The next thing, and then I'll wrap it up, is my husband is an attorney. So I go to the National Bar Association conferences when they're in good locations, right? So they had, last year they had a whole technical day, a technology day. They had Facebook, they had Google, they had Microsoft. And I said to my husband, can I go to these? He said, I don't know, I think you can. And so again, don't wait for permission. I had a badge. I said, well, I'm going to go and I'll just wait for people to tell me I shouldn't be there. And what I did was I sent an email to the people that I wanted to talk with in advance. I said, I'm not a lawyer. I'd love to connect with you, X, Y, and Z. Here's what I'm doing. Boom, there are at least 3 people from that conference I still stay in touch with. One from Microsoft, one from Facebook, and one from Google. And I got to know the past president, Joseph Drayton, right? He invited me to a dinner in New York, and I'm not a lawyer. So these are the things that are right in front of you that are easy for you to do.
I love that. I love that pre-event strategy. I use the pre-event outreach strategy during the event and post-event. One way or another, I'm gonna get to you.
And you know what? I want to say one last thing. Another way to stand out when you're on a webinar is ask questions. Ask a great questions. As panelists, we love people on webinars who are engaged. So if you're coming up with some great ideas, they will remember you. Robin and Krystal will go, oh yeah, I remember you. You asked some great questions. Now is not the time to be quiet and to play small and to be invisible.
Love that. I'm gonna ask the same question to Fatema.
Yes, well, to echo everything that Deborah said, I'm not going to repeat all of it, but networking is the #1 thing that you can do, and people shy away from it because they think it's too much work. But it's actually not a lot of work, especially during this time. We have this era of social distancing, and I actually would rather call it physical distancing. That's what we should be doing. But in terms of social distancing, I don't think we should be doing that. I think we should be doing the opposite. We should be wanting to engage and have those social connections because we have people who are yearning for that right now. They're not going to physical meetings, so they have the time where they're checking their emails, they're checking their LinkedIn. And for people who aren't necessarily comfortable with that, I always say, get your feet wet with your own network. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, it's the best time to kind of create one, but reach out to your own contacts. Particularly on LinkedIn, if you have an interest in, let's say, international law, whatever your interest is, if you type that into the search field, you will have people in your own network that maybe deal in international law that you didn't know dealt with that. Or if you say to me, well, and I get this a lot with a lot of the students is, well, if I knew someone in that area, I would have already called them. But what you don't see is that LinkedIn will also show you 2nd and 3rd connections. So if you know me, and I may not have any direct connections to you, but I know someone who does. And a lot of people, I think one of the things they do is they ask for email introductions. That's not a bad way of asking, but because people are busy, you're kind of relying on the other person to do something for you before you do something. So what I always suggest is if someone's contacting me and they say, hey, Fatema, I want to contact Jim Smith, who does international law, and I notice you're connected to Jim Smith, instead of asking me to do an email instruction, the phrase I like to use is, would you mind if I use your name as a mutual connection? Because then I don't have to do anything. And then that person can go through LinkedIn or that person's workplace email and put in the subject line. And subject lines are very important in emails because people don't tend to open emails from other people they don't know. Cold emails are harder to open. So if you put mutual connection, Fatema Keenan, now I may not know you, but I know Fatema Keenan, so I'm going to open it. And in that line, you say, I noticed on LinkedIn that you're connected to Fatema Keenan. You say how you know me and tell them why you're interested. What Deborah is saying, the key is just when you apply to a job in your cover letter, you say why you're applying to the position. Tell them what was it about their bio or their experience that interested you, and ask them for an informational interview. People love to talk about themselves. And if you ask them, how'd you get into that practice? What advice would you have for someone in my career? That's an easy way to kind of start with your own network and branch out. 3 other really good sources of networking is bar associations. If you're a member of a bar association, they hold panel events all the time. Ask questions at ones like these. They also hold, some of them are holding virtual networking events. Take advantage of that. Also your alumni network, your law school that you went to, many of them have groups on LinkedIn, on Facebook. And as Deborah said, be visible. If you see something on LinkedIn or somewhere else, and it's someone that you're interested in talking to or an area of practice that you're interested in, make a comment, share an article. create a blog post of your own. So those are ways where you can network, and the key is not to just create those networks, but maintain them. The last thing somebody wants is, I met you a year ago and now I see your position, your firm has an open position. Do you remember me from when I talked to you 11 months ago? So I like to use check-in points like holidays, as Deborah mentioned, or summer. How are you doing? And give a quick update of what you're doing. Ask them about the other person so that they don't forget you. Always maintain that level of connection.
And I definitely can attest to that, because I am the queen of relationship touch points. So I love that advice, Fatema. Tara, did you have anything to add?
No, not too much. I mean, it's been covered. It really has. I won't be redundant on that. I just think just make yourself relevant during this time, and don't distance yourself, even though you're social distancing, as we say it. Don't distance yourself from your network. And I'll leave it with this: your network, and this is one of my sayings that I use all the time. So it's your network affects your net worth. So remember that. So the more you build that network, the more you're probably building your net worth.
And although I know that advice well, Tara, my husband repeats it to me every single day. So definitely great advice. Speaking of networks, I'm gonna take one of the questions from the chat, and I'm gonna just rephrase it just a little bit. So I hope this person doesn't mind. And that is, when we're talking about networks and positioning right now, should folks be targeting, should they be marketing themselves and in front of in-house contacts, law firm contacts? Doesn't matter. So what would you recommend, Deborah, as far as strategic, when we're looking at strategic relationships?
All right, I want to make sure that I understand the question. So the question is, should I have a targeted approach towards my networking?
Definitely. That's the question.
I would say yes. So if you are interested in a particular industry, a particular role, a particular company, then you want to gather information and connect with people in those organizations. But you also want to leverage your existing community. And I say community because a lot of people feel really weird with this whole networking thing. Oh, I'm using people, I don't know, I don't want to ask for anything. It's not that. You have a community already in place. And what I say is everybody already has everybody they need in their network if you would just tap into your network. So again, if I know that I want to go to, I don't know, Google, and I want to do something in AI, and I may have a number of people that I'd love to get in touch with. I may ask people in my community. I may say, hey, Tara, Lesley, do you guys know anybody at Google? Now, here's the trick. A lot of people, they call and they say, hey, are you hiring? No, end of conversation, right? That's a dead end. That's not even what you want. You want to learn about the culture. What are they looking for? What are the opportunities there? So it doesn't have to be a hiring manager, right? So a lot of people say, well, I'm not going to reach out to that person because they're not a hiring manager and they're in a totally different department. It doesn't matter. You want to get in and learn more about the organization. And if you're a dynamic person, they may say, hey, you'd be great here. I'd love to connect you with that person. And then when you're in the conversation, ask for additional contacts. I see that's another way that people, I think, miss out is if I'm talking to Fatema, I would say, I'm interested in George Washington for whatever reason. Hey, Fatema, do you know other people that might be helpful for me to reach out to? And that's how you keep it going. And the other thing I want to encourage people when they're networking is to follow up. Follow up. That's the biggest thing I hear from leaders, because people are always texting me ideas for webinars. Leaders will send me examples of notes that they sent out. Follow up, because I'm going to make a prediction, and Valencia will keep me honest. There are about over 100 people on this call. There are 8 people you can reach out to. I predict that no more than 10 people will actually reach out to any panelist here, because everybody's thinking, well, they're really busy. You know, I know they talked about a lot going on. And listen, if I was a job seeker, I would love that because it makes you stand out even more. And I want to leave you with this. It doesn't take a lot to stand out today. Every one of these recruiters here has a short list of candidates. Is that fair to say? They have a short list. These are the people that they are actively working with and they want to genuinely place them. And then they have the others. And so what I will say to you is, whose short list are you on? Because everyone has a short list.
So Deborah, we actually have 200 people on the webinar tonight.
Perfect, 200. I'm gonna still keep my number the same.
Anyone else have
I'm
anything to
doubling
add?
down.
Anyone else have anything to add? Lesley?
I mean, Deborah did such a beautiful job, and I like emphatically nodding my head, which is also a good tip. Engage engage while you're in this era of Zoom calls. But the one thing I'll say, the world and the legal world is so small. So the question originally was like, should I target in-house? Should I target firms? I would say many people have crossed paths with both sides, in-house firms. Everyone knows one another, especially in local bars. So I really think if you're in the interest of if you're in the interest of building your network, meet both. Introduce yourself to many people. They are well connected to one another. The world is small. They'll introduce you. Deborah touched on that. Maybe if one team isn't hiring, another maybe. The other thing that Deborah said that really landed with me, just because the team's not hiring today, things can change like that. You leave an impression, have that informational interview, get together with someone, learn about the organization, let them know about you, and maybe in 2 months, they'll say, this job opened up, somebody left. People are moving a lot right now for personal reasons. Maybe a position opens and you'll be top of mind because you took that informational interview. You took that, you had that conversation. I won't bore you with my details, but if someone writes me, I can tell you about how I ended at Axiom. Was chatting at a random networking event. No, it wasn't a networking event, it was a dinner party. I ended up networking, meeting someone who was a client who then introduced me. There was no job at the time, and 3 months later, they called me for a job. So like, you never know, doors are always opening. And it's just people are so excited to hear of interest and to meet you and to talk to you. So have that confidence and that feather in your cap. The last thing I will say that came from the question before that really, I think Deborah said it too. There's so much to talk. There's so much to connect with people right now. There's so much to talk about. There's also so much to just talk about with Zoom. Like I can say to Krystal, that's such a beautiful piece of art behind you. What's the story behind it? I love art. Is that so-and-so artist? I also follow that. The lighting's gorgeous in your house, Deborah. Where are you located? You don't ask the recruiter where they live, but like, you really want to connect, and you've got, maybe not my background, but I have kids and I'm hiding away right now, but some people have like beautiful things right there for you to talk, like, maybe see a diploma or you see a medal or an award. What was that for? There's so much there to talk about and to build rapport. People are really vulnerable, and you're seeing their home in an interview. That's pretty intimate, pretty quickly. So that's a really nice way to build a trust and a bond and a relationship, which again creates a really safe place for these discussions.
Anyone else?
I'll add this to the question on in-house or law firm. You have to consider your goal, all right? Is this the time that you want to make that move to the in-house role because it's available, or do you want to continue in your firm? Make sure you're making that move or that transition because you want to, not because of the condition. Not because of what's happening with COVID and being unsure of your career. You don't want to make that false step at this time. So I would always ask a person, why are you making this move? What do you want? What is your goal in making that move? And then as others have said, one thing that's evident here, we're recruiters. Have a recruiter. Some of us are recruiters. Have a recruiter that you can have that will be your counsel. I consider myself a career coach in that sense, because I'm actually speaking to individuals on a regular basis. and we're speaking to the law firms, but we're also speaking to the candidates. So a lot of my candidates become clients, a lot of my clients become candidates. It's a full cycle, and our biggest competition would be referrals, internal referrals. So if you don't ask your folks what's going on at your firm or what's happening there, you may not ever know. But that, as a recruiter, that's our biggest competition, internal referrals.
Anyone else?
I would
Well,
also, hi, it's Robin.
Okay.
I would also like to say, I think you also really need to have phenomenal references right now. That is going to be your voice. Who better than to attest to your abilities as an attorney, as a person, know what your references are going to say. Oftentimes when I'm speaking to my candidates, I ask them, are you going to receive a phenomenal reference? Yeah, Jane, she's going to give me a phenomenal reference. Have you sat down with Jane and actually asked Jane what she's going to say about you? If you are contemplating transition, if you're currently employed and you're contemplating transition, the first thing a prospective employer is going to ask you is, why would you be making a transition now? Out of all times, why would you be making a transition now? And you will be able to convey to this person, that you're moving forward with your career, as your employer aware that you're making this move. 90% of the time, our employers are not aware that we are making a move, but I think somewhere in that pipeline, you have someone that you should be able to trust. And in being able to trust that person, hopefully this is the person that's going to be that great advocate who's going to be your reference. I think references, again, right now are critical. I also think that people really need to pay attention to their resumes and what they say, and make sure that they are in alignment with what they are conveying when they're transitioning, when they're making that move. When you're sitting down and you're talking to a true decision maker, make sure that your resume is in alignment with that move, and make sure that it makes sense. I think Tara can attest to this, and as recruiters, we're on the front line. So you have to be able to make it make sense to us so that we can make it make sense to a prospective employer. And right now, career moves need to make sense. And, I agree, not just because open house sounds kind of savvy right now. It really, really needs to make sense when you're making moves right now.
In the essence of time, I'm gonna skip over some of the questions that we had, and I want to touch on a topic that we talked about a little bit earlier, and that is, how do you thrive in a remote environment? And I think this is a great tie-in when it comes to positioning and marketability. So I'm going to ask Deborah this question, and that is, what are things that women on the line can be doing to excel in a remote environment? Because I know you helped me. Even you recommended when I talked to you last week, to get my lighting right, get my background right, and get my camera. So I did all of that, after speaking with you. So what are some other ways that women can excel?
So I would start with what you just said, with the basics. Invest in the right equipment, particularly if you're going to be interviewing. Don't show up looking really dark with a crazy looking background. Know how you look on video. Not everybody's personality or energy or leadership even transfers to the video. If that is you, you need to practice. You need to get you a free subscription to Zoom. You need to understand how to use Zoom, because listen, people are looking at you on video thinking this is how they're going to show up for my customers. And what they're seeing is going to be the best of you, because everybody's at their best on interview day. So if I start there and you look crazy or unprofessional, or you're just not comfortable in that medium, I think that can be problematic. I just want to also encourage people, get comfortable with the remote environment. I hear people saying a lot when I have them on Zoom, the Zoom, I'm still getting used to this technology. People don't want to hear that. It is your responsibility to understand how to use and leverage this technology. also in an interview setting or even meeting with clients. I have clients all over the country, right? So I've been on Zoom for 4 years. So do you know how to share additional supplemental information in an interview? Do you have something that you might want to share or walk them through? Do you know how to get on Zoom and share it in a way that shows your leadership, that shows you being innovative? So one, just get comfortable in that environment. Other than that, I'm going to say it should be no different. The same things you would talk about people in office are the same things you should be talking to them now. Give you an example. I had someone who started on a new job, and I think Tara mentioned this, someone working remotely. So I said, well, have you met the other people in the organization or on the team? Well, no, not yet. Set up those meetings the same way you would if you were new to the organization. I said, you're going to go through all of these people and you're going to set up a virtual meeting. And if you're new to an organization, that's the best time. Everybody wants to meet the new person. They want to understand who you are, what you bring to the table. So do those same things you would normally do. Work on your energy so that you come across as somebody that people want to engage in. There are some people who don't put a lot of energy into their video presence. And remember, it's an extension of your brand. And I'm just gonna look for head nods, maybe from Tara or Robin. There are some people who are just duds on video. And what you're saying is it's not that they have to be duds, but you go, they didn't put any effort into this. And here's the thing, people will never tell you that. They just won't call you again, right? So I'm seeing the head nods too. Be proactive, reach out to people. You know, if you feel like you're not connecting, be innovative, be the leader. Say, hey guys, do you guys want to get together on the team for a happy hour? And guess what? Bring your kids or bring your pets, you bring your spouse. That's a fun way to engage. If you are an introvert, I actually think remote can be better because it allows you to interact with people one-on-one. Not everybody's good in a big group. So introverts, this is your time to shine. Ask for the same things you would if you were in the workplace. For example, do you want to be on special projects or special teams? Listen to that. I mean, take a look at that and then ask for those things. Connect with leaders. That's one of the things I've seen with professionals of color. We don't want to connect at a high level. We like to stay right about here because it's nice and safe and comfortable. I'm going to throw a challenge out to you. Get to know people throughout the organization, not just the people you feel comfortable with, because those are the people, when they have a list in front of you and they have to decide who stays or goes, lots of times your name is on the list and you're the first one out because nobody knows you. They don't know the value you bring. They don't know what you're working on. They're like, is that the person who's always on Zoom with the video off? And I just want to talk about that for a minute. Does anybody know someone who's always on video with their camera off? Yep. What do we think about those people, honestly? We think they're not engaged. Tara's laughing. It's true, right? Because my approach to working with organizations and clients is to be honest. When you are not showing up on video consistently, you don't look like you're engaged. People can't see you. It's harder for people to connect with you. So I want to encourage you to show up, let people see you. This is a great time for people who haven't had the opportunity before to show your leadership. Some people are going to be surprised when they go back to the office because the person that they used to sit next to is they're now going to be reporting to, because that person has been networking for the last 6 months. They've been working on special projects. They've still been reaching out to the people that they need to know. Nothing has changed for them except for the geography. And so if you think about it like that, I think you will thrive. And listen, everybody wants a distraction today. I'm talking to people that I normally wouldn't talk to because, you know, I have some extra time, or I just, you know, I've been in the office for 15 hours. I'm happy for the distraction. So I would say just get comfortable with it and get out of your comfort zone. Do things differently. Remote, I think, is here to stay. And to the job searchers, I also want to say this. get outside of those non-traditional methods, right? This is the time to be creative and innovative. Use Instagram. Create your own brand separate from your organization or an organization you want to belong with on LinkedIn. I get business from corporations from LinkedIn because they are followers and they know the things that I have a very specific brand. I focus on navigating the corporate arena with professionals of color. I don't try to do health and wellness and all of that. That is my lane. So you can be a subject matter expert online, create your brand, and remote, nothing changes. You are still representing your brand remotely. So keep that in mind, because when you disappear, people are thinking things. They may not be thinking things that are accurate, but they're creating their own narrative about why you aren't on video, why you aren't showing up. That's it.
Anybody else? Well, you mentioned something, Deborah, and you said get out of these traditional methods, right? And I think that that's a great segue into what is a hot topic in the Q&A box, and that is, and I love this question, and that is, I'm going to turn this question actually over to Tara. This is going to be to Tara and Lesley, because I think that they can speak to this, and that is, are you seeing more attorneys enter into alternative, non-traditional career fields? And if so, what are steps to make that pivot? And I know that all of you, including myself, have made that type of pivot, including and a number of you as well. But I'm going to start with Lesley.
So yes, I'm definitely seeing, I think to Deborah's point, this is a chance to just be exploratory with your career, in how you network, in who you talk to, in what paths you want your career to take. And it's sort of a full circle story. You should be right now talking to a lot of people, about your own, just connecting, networking, always building those relationships, and in a way almost interviewing other people. What do they do? What kind of job do they have? What's their path look like? And it's also a time, I think Tara said, like, a lot of people are spending time thinking and reflecting on what they feel fulfilled with, what's fulfilling for them in their role. Maybe some of the things that they loved about a job or a role are no longer, maybe it was more of the on site or where it was, or they loved going downtown. And now that that's taken away, what does the role look like? There's just time to reflect. And when I think about, Krystal, I know you set this up, we've made career transitions. So I was a practicing lawyer, and I remember looking back and thinking, like, what about the role do I love? And the things that I remember that I loved were the people side of law. I loved coaching. I loved talking to my fellow associates about how they were going to navigate something, how they were going to seek out work from a partner. When they were feeling stressed, I would provide that kind of relief. Like, what I started to think about the things I was enjoying most, and then talked to friends, mentors, colleagues, which are all things we should be doing right now, to hear about what paths I could take that was still legal and in law, but would pull on some of the things that I found most fulfilling. So, there's with a room full of law students and lawyers, roles like firm associate coordinators, the recruiters at the law firms, PD at firms, that always felt to me like that would be a great spot for me to go, because I have the legal background, I've practiced for a couple of years, I've done that sort of junior hustle, but I actually would rather sort of hear about a deal and coach someone through it, or build relationships, or help with sustainability in a role. And so I spoke to people and asked how they made transitions, how that happened, who they spoke to, and I would learn about these other opportunities to then hone in on, hey, you know what, this feels like a really great launching pad and a really great fit for me. So that was sort of a long-winded, I'm trying to also tie it back to the era we're in, but if what you're doing right now is soul searching and reflecting, whether that's by choice because you've got a little extra time and you're still employed, or whether maybe you're in between roles right now and you have some time to think, take that time to really think what's fulfilling to you, what pulls on your natural strengths, what kind of work feels most enjoyable and enriching to you, and then find those people who have those experiences and talk to them. So we're tying onto that networking. Interview them, talk to them. You don't actually have to interview them, but that's sort of what it is. You become the interviewer. What does your role look like? What is your company's mission? What are the kind of opportunities within the organization? Do you have a sister company that does something similar? Asking those questions, learning about it should really make this time, it's a fluid time, and in a way that kind of creates that green light to make a shift and a transition. A lot in there.
No, thank you for that. And we're coming up on time, but Lesley, I want to give you, Tara, I want to give you some time to answer that question as well, because you were also one who talked about pivoting.
Pivoting. Okay, first of all, I was a basketball player at Howard University as well, right? So pivot foot is, right? So you stay on that pivot foot and then you move around to see what the options are as you're staying on the foot without traveling, right? So that's why I'll give that as an example, because that pivot is exactly what happens. I started off as an investigator with the Department of Labor. I was first generation law school. I did not necessarily have a straight line. So with a pivot, it doesn't necessarily look like it makes sense at first. So I would say, leave your mind open. Someone else mentioned being flexible. So I was an investigator, 2 years, Department of Labor. I wanted to stay on the labor and employment route. I loved entertainment law because I was an athlete. I knew all the other athletes. I said, I'm gonna be the biggest agent ever, but I wanna go to law school. So, what do I do? So I ended up being recruited out from the Department of Labor to a corporation to deal with labor relations. So I'm negotiating contracts, collective bargaining agreements. I would have been a great candidate coming through Howard. At the time, we didn't have a JD MBA program. So I loved business and industry, worked for Procter & Gamble during the summers in the Enrolls program. So I thought corporate, but let's mix some law there and let's go that route. So didn't know that I'd go from corporate to another company because the company transitioned. They were purchased by NiSource out in Indiana. I'm a Philadelphia girl. I did not want to go where the cornfields were at the time, right? So I stayed in the city. Ended up going to Ellen Financial, which is in New York. So we all know what happened in New York, 9/11. So no fault of my own, just like COVID, I was left to a situation working for the CEO, and we knew the transition was coming. But like everyone said, I kept communication, I continued to network. I didn't know how it would happen, but I was able to move and transition into actually consulting. So I traveled a lot. I actually went to Houston a couple of times. I told Krystal that we were working with Halliburton. A recruiter recruited me. I have a daughter now actually in the class of 2020. So she's a 2020 grad dealing with the online Zoom. Congratulations. She's coming out to California. She's going to UC Davis. So Robin, I might have to call you. But I say this, so a pivot is not always a bad thing. A pivot is something that you can actually move your career forward to a place that you never knew. So I was recruited by a recruiter, and I think we both worked for this company at one time, recruited at Robert Half, and then I've gone on to others. So that started my career. It was during the downturn. We had a glut of great candidates. We had people who were graduating recently, like GW grads, coming in with deferred offers at the time. And then we also had partners who were downsized and their firm shut down, like Howery Simon. You probably don't even know their name now because they imploded at that point, and they were the sharks of the legal world. So say all of that, I'm now a recruiter for 12 years. I thought it was going to be a temporary position where I could actually find a job for myself. I thought, oh yeah, I'll stay here for a little while and find a new job. And who knew? I've been doing this for 12 years. So that's my way of answering the question. And pivot away, but keep communication open.
Krystal, I had one thing to Tara's comment about pivoting, and I'm really mindful of the time. I think you also want to remember that sometimes you pivot and you decide you want to come back, and that's okay. It's a safe time to try something new, as long as you, as to Tara's point, keep good rapport, good relationships. Doors always stay open, and careers are long finding stories. A lot of us are recruiters. I love reading resumes and figuring out, oh, they made that move and that's why they went here and they moved here because of that. There's stories. And so as long as you sort of have a story to tell, it's okay if you go in one direction and then the other and then maybe come back, and you should feel empowered to do that. It's not such a risk, and I think that makes it a little bit more of an exciting venture.
And so many things that you said, there's several things that y'all said, it resonated with me as someone else who pivoted, and that is to remain open-minded. Self-reflection is key. and to tap in, Lesley, as you said, to your strengths, to your interests. That always is great advice when you're looking to make a pivot. And I want to be respectful of time, so I want to end by addressing the law students that are on the line. And so these questions are going to be geared toward you, Fatema, because we've actually had a few of them that have left some questions in our chat. And so I'm going to combine some questions here. And that is, what steps would you say should students or recent graduates be taking to position themselves for future success in the current market?
It's a good question. I'm going to be mindful of time. So I like to outline. So if I was doing an outline, I would give 4 steps. And the first would be, this is for both students who are law students currently, recent graduates, and I think even for those who are still wanting to make a lateral move, is getting your job application documents updated and tight. What I mean by that is, a lot of times we get so into what we're currently doing is that we're not mindful of, do we have an updated writing sample? Do we have a transcript if a position calls for it? Because the last thing you want to do is you see a deadline for a particular position that's posted and they're requiring a transcript. And now I have to go in the time of COVID and reach out to my law school and get a transcript if I don't have one. So it's always good to kind of plan ahead and have that in your pocket in case you need it. You don't want to need something at the very moment that you need it. So I would say look at your writing samples. If you have access to a career center, I know at GW Law here, for a year after graduation, you have access to the career center, both in terms of job opportunities and as well as coaching. And after that year, the alumni office helps in terms of those things. So take advantage of your law school and the services that you will be getting for free, even as a lateral attorney or a recent graduate. Go to them, say, this is what my resume looks like. Even if it's gotten you a job in the past, it's always helpful to get someone whose job it is to look at resumes and cover letters, because even with great ones that I see, there's always a suggestion that somebody has that may be helpful to you. So that's one thing in terms of take this time to tighten up your job application documents so that they're ready when you need one. The second is, particularly for law students, is bar exams. I think a lot of times people are so focused on, where am I going to take the bar exam? Or do I have a job? And what I'm not saying is don't not look for a job, but also keep your eye on the prize, and that is passing the bar. Because particularly for lawyers, your marketability either rises or tanks based on bar results. Particularly if you're looking at firms and large firms, there are many firms who give you one shot to pass the bar, and that's all you have. And their viewpoint is, I'm paying this amount of money for someone that's just graduated law school, and they're very well aware of when bar results come out. So why should I pay the same amount of money to someone who didn't pass the bar versus now I just have a whole slew of students who I know have passed the bar and are looking for jobs? So what I'm not saying is you're not going to get a job if you don't pass the bar the first time. I don't want to cause panic to law students. But what I am saying is, be very mindful of balancing your wanting to get the job right after law school, but also focusing on, ultimately, if I want to be a practicing attorney, the bar passage is something that I have to keep in mind. And employers oftentimes know exactly what that timeline is. With COVID, that's changed and been pushed back because bar exams have been pushed back as well. So that was the second thing in terms of be mindful of having the time to study for the bar and do that. A lot of people ask me, well, what can I do in the meantime? Financial concerns that law students have, and maybe you just graduated in May and you're not licensed yet, you're waiting to take the bar, and no one's kind of willing to hire because they're waiting till a year later for bar results to come out because they furloughed a lot of people. What do I do now? Particularly if you live in a large city. I'm in DC, so I can tell you there's a ton of document review agencies out there. And essentially, it's a good way to do a lot of work and make some money. Many of them have overtime hours, so they pay by the hour. Essentially, it's large litigation where you are reviewing emails and assessing the privilege status or relevancy of documents. Most of the time, it's not temporary, but I mean, most of the time it's not permanent, but it's a good temporary kind of limbo in terms of what can I do while I'm searching for a permanent job. Many of those positions now are remote, which is another advantage with the trends that we're seeing, both in document review positions and in legal positions. The law tends to be very conservative, and so they weren't tending to do remote because you bill in 6-minute increments, right? Well, now they've been forced to kind of figure out how to operate in a COVID world, and they see, well, I save money in terms of office space, lights, all of that sort of thing. So they're more amenable to remote work. The third thing, networking, everyone's kind of talked about that. So don't forget, because it literally is the #1 way that you get a job. More in terms of statistic wise, and the Department of Labor says it's too, it pays off in the end. And don't be discouraged, because the job hunt is a numbers game. You may knock down a lot of doors. You may send cold emails out, informational interview requests, and wonder, why am I not getting so much feedback? You only need one. You only need one yes, right? So keep that in mind. Don't get discouraged. It's a numbers game. As Deborah said, ask. Because if you don't ask, the answer is always going to be no. You're not even in the game at all. And when you get that yes to an informational interview, remember, it's your meeting. So it's your agenda. You don't want to get into a situation where they've agreed to an informational interview and it's just crickets. So have a set of questions that you want the answers to. What do you want to know about their practice area? What do you want to know about them? So that you have something to talk about and build rapport. And the last thing I would say is be visible, right? And visible can be, it doesn't have to be in terms of the physical space, but be engaged, be visible, whether it's through your alumni network, whether it's connecting with people that you haven't connected in a while. Now's a perfect opportunity and a reasoning to reach out during the time of COVID. You have people engaged and ready to want to talk to you. Ask them how they are. Again, look at the bar associations, take CLE classes, because now you also, especially if you're looking to pivot and you're looking to kind of gain more experience into a certain area that you've never practiced in, learn more about it. And when you apply for those positions, you can say, hey, I just took a CLE on the substantive matter in this area. So that makes you more marketable. So those are the kind of 4 things that I would say focus on right now, and they'll lead you to future opportunities. And when you network, always ask if there's somebody else that person knows that may talk to you. Because I'll end with this. I had a professor who said, if you network with one person and that doesn't lead to another networking opportunity, that's not a successful network. So always continue to network throughout your career, not just when you're looking for a job, and it'll pay off in the end.
Thank you, Fatema. Those were some great nuggets, and we're actually a few minutes over. But I definitely want to be respectful of everyone's time. But before we jump off, we've had a number of folks in the chat asking, how can they find you, ladies? You know, they need career coaching, they need recruiters, they need communities. So I want to leave with that. Maybe just go around, and if you could provide your contact information and where people can find you, that would be a great way to close out. I'll start with Robin.
You will find me at R Legrand, Legrand, at ACT-1.com. My phone number is 213-787-2287. If you would like to write to me, our physical address in downtown LA is 725 South Figueroa Street, Suite 2100, Los Angeles 90017.
Deborah?
Everyone can reach out to me. The best way is via LinkedIn. I'm under Deborah T. Owens. Or they can go to our website at the Corporate Alley Cat. And I just want to say we have a lot of free resources there to help people at any stage of their career.
Thank you. Lesley?
Also, LinkedIn is a great way to reach me. I'm under Lesley, Lesley, Crowell, Croll, Henry. So you have to get that middle name in there to find me. And then my email, and I'm wedded to my email, so I will respond if you reach out. It's Lesley, Lesley.Henry, Henry, at Axiom Law, AXIOMLAW, axiomlaw.com. So Lesley Henry at axiomlaw.com.
Thank you. Tara?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is great. It's Tara Gray JD. So J is in Jack, D is in David. And then my Randstad is tara.gray, Gray, at randstadusa.com. So that's RANDSTAD USA.com.
And Fatema.
I'm on LinkedIn as well. You can find me at Fatema, F as in Frank, ATEMA. Middle name is Dariani, DARIA, N as in Nancy, I, Keenan, KEENAN. You can also send me an email at gw@fdkeenan@law.gwu.edu. And if you do a Google search for Fatema Keenan at GW Law Career Center, it'll send you my email that way as well too.
And then lastly, for those looking for me, LinkedIn is #1 for me, and it's Krystal Studavent Ramsey. That's KRYSTAL. Studavent is STUDAVENT. Ramsey, RAMSEY, that long married name. So anyways, I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. It's been a rich conversation as usual. Again, thank you to you, Valencia. Thank you to you, Madam President Robinson, for another great program. And everybody, wherever you are, have a great evening, night.
Krystal,
yes,
our president will close us out. Our president will close us out.
Let me say my closing. I'm gonna turn it over then to Madam President Robinson. And so thank you again for having me. Take care. Turning it over to you, Madam President.
Yes, before I turn it over to our president of the National Bar Association, as chair of the Women Lawyers Division, I also want to thank all of our panelists. The Women Lawyers Division wanted to bring you some of the best in the industry. And as you've seen, you have 2 recruiters, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. You have an executive career coach. You have an individual from Axiom Law Firm who hires on-demand attorneys for long and short-term assignments. And we have a panelist for our law students, a career counselor, and one of my colleagues at GW Law School. And so we hope you've enjoyed the presentation tonight. Definitely reach out and use these panelists as a resource. We're also going to post their contact information on the Women Lawyers Division Facebook page. And we thank Madam President of the National Bar Association for allowing the Women Lawyers Division to participate in the COVID-19 webinars and to bring you these amazing women to share this information. And now I'll turn it over to the President of the National Bar Association, President Alfreda Robinson.
Good evening. This has been extraordinary. And I was thinking what I would say because I was taking in so much, I couldn't write notes. And so let me just say this. Madam Chair Valencia Rainey, you have something that I'm going to charge you to do.
Yes.
I want you to bring this panel to the convention. Our virtual. Okay, now, I have spent many years listening to many panels on careers, etc. I have never heard a better panel than this panel. Never.
Agreed.
I've been a member of many organizations. And so what we have to do is make this happen. Chair Rainey, I got an email from a past president to said, this is awesome. So we have to do that. Now to the panelists, thank you so much. This was rich, extraordinarily rich. Now, if I could add one thing, when I start my new class every year of LLMs, I always say, and when we have the JDs, I say, every year your resume should be updated. You should have something that you have done, even if it's volunteering for GWAC, volunteering for the women's division. Law students in particular, young lawyers, you meet a lot of people and you work hard and you learn a lot. And so I said, well, have you, and hands go up. Then I say, did you change it this morning? You just started a new law school. does it say George Washington candidate for? So if you didn't, if someone asked you for your resume would be outdated. I loved everything the panel had to say. I'm not going to repeat it, except to say thank you for this opportunity to provide this very rich conversation during COVID. That's all, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Madam President.